of all, I guess just a little bit of background. Tell me about yourself.
For sure. So we've lived in Northumberland for about just over 20 years. Chose this as a place to live for lots of reasons. It reminds me a lot of home, which for me actually was Muskoka. And when we kind of came across it after living in Toronto, it had that really neat mix of rural and also having more populated areas as well, and hospitals and schools and things like that. And we actually ended up in Campbellford to start. It was a lot further than I thought. I was working at Northumberland General at the time. My husband was at Manulife downtown. He's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's great here." And then it's like, "Oh, that is far." And that's what led me to go to Teachers College. So after 20 some odd years of employee benefits, pension sales. I also did wealth and estate planning. I was a certified financial planner, worked at Northwark General for a few years as well. Career shift to teaching, and in my 40s I started at the Center for Individual Studies out in Clarington, where I worked with lots of folks, some teenage students, but a lot of adults as well. At that time, Oshawa had a lot of unemployed folks because of General Motors, and a lot of them didn't have their high school. They started working when they were 16, and suddenly they needed a high school diploma. So that was a really exciting time to be able to implement some of the liberal policies at the time that really increased student engagement. It was a creative time. I did lots of PLAR, which is Prior Learning Acquisition and Recognition, an acronym that basically says if you're a millwright, you probably have the skills that you get in a mechanical trades course in a high school. If you ran your own business, you could probably get an entrepreneurship credit pretty quick. So looking through someone's resume and their past experience, we basically said, yeah, you know all these things that you would have learned in high school, here's a credit for those. And that was a way for someone who had not enough credits to be able to get their high school diploma in 3 or 4 months and get right back in the workforce. That was one of the things that brought me into teaching. And under a McGuinty government, I mean, it really was a great opportunity. So we lived in Campbellford for about 8 years, had a tremendous time there, and then my husband said, could we move a little bit closer to the train station? Love that train 651 that gets me downtown right off the bat, and so we've moved to Almac-Haldeman. We're right in the Northumberland Forest, which we love. I call it no place like home, which is sort of my Dorothy Wizard of Oz thing going on there a little bit. We have about a meter of snow on the ground right now, and it's beautiful. So that's kind of where we're at.
What got you into politics?
The same thing that got me into teaching, except the opposite. I have had a great time teaching. I love my students. I teach business, accounting, entrepreneurship. I have lots of my kids that are out there with their own businesses now. The environment has changed dramatically over the last 6 years. The funding level, although we're being told that they're at historic levels, they're actually, in a real dollar perspective, $1,500 less than they were in 2018. And I'm experiencing every one of those $1,500 less, but not as much as my colleagues. The frustration and the exasperation they have it's almost like they're MacGyver, trying to, how do we make do? And I know as frustrating as they are, healthcare workers are even more so, and they're dealing with life or death stuff. Emergency room wait times, 22,000 people in Northumberland County without a family physician. That's ridiculous. And I'm not necessarily at the end of my career, but I guess I am, in the sense I quit a week and a half ago in order to do this, because it's that important that people with a depth of skill and a depth of experience take those skills and offer them to the public. Public service, basically, getting our institutions back is what it's going to take. It's not career politicians that are going to solve this. It's people that actually know the way things work. And when I look at the slate of candidates on the Liberal side, whether it's healthcare or whether it's Ted Hsu in Kingston with a PhD in physics and sustainable energy. Like, there is such a depth of experience to fix those problems. It's exciting, actually, to get in and bring our Ontario back.
With the government the way it is Ford in there for good, or like, it's one of these things, I guess. How do I raise it? But I mean, do you have a fighting chance, or tell me?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've been knocking doors since November, despite the fact the election was not supposed to happen until June of 2026. We read the tea leaves back in the fall. We knew it was coming. It was just a question of when. We didn't think it would be February, but you know what? You do what you got to do. It's a self-serving, unnecessary, expensive $189 million election, basically to keep his job. People are smart. They recognize the fact that there's no reason why we should be in election. Knocking on doors in 2022, it was a very, very different time. People were kind of shrugging. Yeah, you know what? He's not so bad. Now, yeah, it's bad, and they recognize the fact that no, there are not enough family doctors. Clear-cutting Ontario Place in the dead of night. Science Center shutting it down because there's some ceiling tiles that could have been fixed. Like, the list is just endless in terms of, I mean, you have to challenge yourself to say what has been done right. And based on the reception we're having at the doors, people are really looking for a change.
What would you do for this area?
Oh my goodness, where to start? It's such a vast area, and I got to tell you, to drive from one end to the other is a challenge. I've lived in the more remote areas of our riding, and you feel ignored to an extent. Everything happens in the major centers. Everything is either Cobourg centric or Port Hope centric, whether it comes to social programs. When it comes to healthcare, transportation, access to technology. We need to be a lot more responsive to those areas and start looking at hubs, particularly for things like social services, where someone doesn't have to go to Cobourg, where you're starting to see things more locally. Helping out businesses from a technological perspective, and whether that's a fund or a series of whether there's loans or grants to make them competitive so that they can compete. Youth is always going to be my thing as well, and I look at Loyalist College closing down programs in trades, of all things. Like, that investment has to come back into post-secondary. We have to start looking at apprenticeships that actually work versus just paying lip service to the fact that, oh yeah, you can become an apprentice. Go ahead and try being an apprentice. It's very, very difficult for youth to get to those high-paying jobs that they've been told about in terms of actually putting that into place. I mean, there's a lot. But I'm grateful for my background in terms of having a background in business, having a background in education, a little bit of healthcare, but also having mentors throughout the province that I would, you want to go to the experts to find out, what are you doing in, whether it's Barrie or whether it's in Kingston or wherever else, and start looking at solutions also that cross lines, that make they're a full government solution as opposed to being in silos. Looking at even crossing party lines as well. Like, no one has all the answers. The more collaboration you can get to come up with those solutions, the better those solutions are going to be.
Thank you for your time.
No worries.